Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast. And this is episode number 2 in our mini-series with the Thoughtspark team. Our first episode in the series about B2B and PIM MDM systems, I shot with Sham from the Thoughtspark team, and we talked about really data as an asset. We talked about the business case for data as an asset and what that means to your business, whether you're a retailer, whether you're B2C, D2C, or B2B. Now we're specifically going to start diving a little bit deeper into the specifics of PIM systems for B2B. We're going to talk a little bit more about the business case, how to make one, the value proposition of PIM MDM for B2B businesses, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Samarth Mehta from Thoughtspark to the pod. Welcome, Samarth.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for the kind introduction and really excited about this series.
I'm super excited. Look, we've been friends and colleagues, and we've worked on projects together, I think, for about 5 years, maybe even a little bit now. And I have always been super, super impressed with your knowledge, your experience, your demeanor, your ability to come in and rescue difficult PIM projects. In fact, the very, very first time we met, you had come in to rescue a PIM project that was being implemented by a vendor, and we were experiencing some real challenges. And I think we could talk about that a little bit further later on. But I always encourage, whether it doesn't really matter what the technology in the stack is, I always recommend that technology is implemented wherever possible by a third-party professional services specialist in that technology, because oftentimes product companies, whether they're SaaS companies, on-prem, PaaS, doesn't really matter. Product companies oftentimes really struggle to implement their own technology, their own solutions. Whereas if you go with a dedicated implementation partner, oftentimes, and that's their bread and butter, oftentimes that could go so much more smoothly, can't it?
Yeah, I think again, I want to give a diplomatic answer here, and I think my point of view would be that because I worked for a product company and I was part of a professional services organization at one point, so I've learned a lot as a part of that. And I think yes, as product companies, probably primary focus in building the product, absolutely. And of course, professional services. I love services. I love being a part of being in front of the customer, and I'm really passionate about it. And I guess that's what counts. And that's what probably helped us in that project. And I think, yeah, it's about the passion. I think as long as whether you're on the product side or on the other side, make sure you've got to have that passion for the product, for the technology, have the domain expertise. And I think you could do it right. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. And you've been operating in this space for over a decade now. You were originally at Riversand Technology, so PIM, Product Information Management, MDM, Master Data Management Solutions. You were over at Riversand as an internal team member at Riversand for almost 5 years. You then, once you left them, you established your own company, Data.io, and you and your team were doing PIM MDM implementations with the Riversand technology platform. And now you have merged into a larger entity, a bigger company called Thoughtspark, and you are now the general manager India for Thoughtspark. And Thoughtspark, not only, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, not only do you do direct implementations of PIM MDM solutions on behalf of customers, but you also act as a strategic enablement partner for other agencies, professional services companies, and SIs that want to do implementation of PIM MDM solutions, but maybe they don't have the skills, they don't have the experience, they don't have the depth of bench. Maybe they need to get up to speed on doing these implementations, because a lot of agencies, even e-commerce implementation agencies, even SIs that recognize the need for PIM MDM solutions, they may not know how to actually do the implementation of those solutions or do the system integration of those solutions. And that's where somebody like Thoughtspark comes into play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, Jason, one thing that we've realized, it's that in this time and age, I think it's all about collaborations. That's how you and I met, and we've worked together, and it's about solving the end customer's problem. And honestly, there isn't a services company that can say that does it all and will solve all the end problems for a customer, right? So it's all about finding the right partnerships and the right relationships. And we've been a part of the Syndigo ecosystem for so long that we know pretty much all the partners. And of course, coming in from the Riverside background and pretty much the core team of Riverside being with us, it was a no-brainer for us to really contribute in the right way to the ecosystem and build this community that we built all these relationships to keep nurturing those. Absolutely. Setting up new partners, when new agencies, when they see, for example, if you're in e-commerce agencies and you know that you need a PIM system for your customer, and you don't want to just go in and tell the customer, yeah, why don't you just start an RFP and go and figure out what you need to do? You want to handhold the customer through the process because you're going to be the receiving end of that system, right? So you're receiving the data from the PIM. And if that integration doesn't go smoothly, you're going to also be on the receiving side of bad data, not achieving your e-commerce goals. As an agency, it makes sense to collaborate with somebody like us that can really help you to be your backend and you starting a new line of business that could be just focused on PIM and collaborate to solve your customer's problem while still being the front on that, right? So that's the model that we were thinking about. And it's worked fantastic for us. We've onboarded quite a lot of partners over the last couple of years. And I think, like I said, this is all about collaborations and working together to solve an end problem, right? And that's our goal.
Yeah, and look, I think that there's a role to play for consultancies, there's a role to play for SIs, there's a role to play for enablement companies like yours, because you're almost like a hybrid SI combined with a hybrid consultancy, combined with a hybrid enablement partner that can help these SIs get up to speed on this PIM MDM space and on the solutions and how to implement them, how to scope them, how to scope the integration correctly. And I think there's a role to play for all of us. If it's a consultancy like me, I'm going to go in. I don't do implementations, but what I can do is I can go in, I can help with the search and select process. I can help with the overall full stack solution architecture and how all these components fit together within the stack, which component does what and why. Help a seller really establish a reasonable budget, not only for the implementation, but also the price of the software. What should you really expect to be budgeting for a proper implementation and a proper solution that's going to serve you long term and is going to build an infiniscale model for your business across the entire stack. And then there's obviously people like you that come in, you help us make sure that we're scoping the solution correctly as part of the stack, that we're making sure that we're doing all of the data structure and the architecture correctly, that we're doing the mappings correctly, that we're setting up the right data dictionary, that we're rolling up and down attributes as required against product sets and product categories, and that we really understand data structures really intimately that are needed to serve these businesses at a high level. And what we find in the B2B world, and we'll get a little bit more into sort of making the business case, the value prop of PIM, but I think one of the unique standout of the B2B space in particular is the fact that typically speaking, the catalogs are orders of magnitude larger and more complex than product catalogs in the B2C and D2C world. It is not uncommon in the B2C and D2C world to have a catalog of less than 50,000 SKUs, whereas in the B2B world, oftentimes catalogs start at 50,000 SKUs and they can go up to multiple millions of SKUs covering multiple categories, multiple layers of complexity in the product detail, especially when we're talking things like industrial products with highly complex product sets and attributes around those products because they have to be spec'd into a specific engineering solution, for example. So just out of the gate, when we start thinking of PIM MDM for B2B, it is just the implementation, the architecture, everything about it is typically orders of magnitude more complex than your typical retail implementation of a PIM.
I totally agree to that. And I think with B2B and then also coming in from a legacy mindset of getting onboarded with getting into digital catalogs and building out a front end and into the new B2B commerce space, it is getting out of the mindset also, because I think B2B companies can be very disorganized. I've worked with some in the past where, every category manager has their own way of maintaining the data. They're just sending it to some and everybody's creating, and I don't know how big it is still, but physical catalogs still continue to exist, right? And people building out their own physical catalogs and things like that. So it's been, the challenge is also an adoption challenge where just the fact that you don't have all of this organized in one place and getting it together, I think is a bigger business problem than a technology problem. And just having that outlook towards going into a new way of selling, a new way of thinking about how we're going to approach our cataloging, I think just changing that mindset is a huge challenge with B2B businesses.
And the other thing that I routinely hear when I'm consulting to some of these B2B sellers, whether they're a manufacturer, wholesaler, or distributor, we have an ERP. Why do we need a PIM? Right? And when we're starting to think about the value prop and the business case that you need to build out for a PIM, what I try to explain is it's all about right tools for the job, right? Now, an ERP is usually fantastic when it comes to running your accounting practice inside the business, making sure that all of your financials in order, making sure that your GL is in order, making sure that your inventory counts are in order, making sure that your pricing is in order for your specific customers, especially in the B2B world, making sure that your discount model is correct inside the platform. Maybe you're even running your OMS and your WMS out of your ERP, which is very common, your order management, warehouse management out of your ERP. So it's an operational platform. It is not typically most ERPs do not make fantastic product data platforms because oftentimes they are not designed. They are designed to hold the minimum amount of product data required to sell that product. So oftentimes in an ERP, we'll see the name of a product, the SKU of a product, we'll see the price of a product, right? And we'll see the inventory of the product. That's typically the four core components. Maybe we'll have a short description. Maybe we'll have some basic product attributes, maybe the size and the weight of the product so that we can do order processing with that. And maybe we could do warehouse management with that, or we can put products away in the right space. But beyond that, most ERPs, they can maybe be customized to do elements of a PIM, but they are not really well set up to hold all of the structured and unstructured product data, plus all of the multimedia information, the attachments, the PDFs, the exploded drawings. Most ERPs, they're just not designed to be able to not only hold and organize all of this rich product data we need to be able to sell a product, but also to be able to contextualize that data by channel. Exactly. So ERPs are just not designed for this. They are designed to hold information needed to sell the product to a customer, but not to merchandise the product for a customer, to make search and find easier, nor are they prepared to really hold all the data that is driving all this AI innovation in the market. So maybe I could just get your thoughts. That's probably the single biggest challenge I face when I go in as a solution architect and I first started talking to a B2B seller and I start talking to them about the value of a PIM system, what it brings to their business, the value prop of a PIM system. And 9 times out of 10, they say, we have an ERP. We don't think we need a PIM. So do you hear this as well? Is this a common refrain that you hear from a lot of brands?
Yes. I think in the B2B space, especially, because what's happening is, let's think about a seller's journey, right? In a typical way, right? You have an account manager who's been managing all of these customers for years. He has a relationship. They pick up the phone. They call him. They know what they're looking for. He knows what to sell to them. And he's probably looking up the SKU numbers and just punching in an order into an ERP and saying, hey, it's all good, right? And probably these are a lot of relationship-based sales instead of coming to find something and look for something. But like I said, as businesses have grown, and with these new customer journeys, I know on one of your podcasts I was hearing a lot of B2B buyers are now millennials. They're people that are tech savvy, that
over 60% in the US now.
Exactly. And so now they all understand the computer. They know how to operate it. They know how, so they're not, they in fact would avoid the interaction of calling somebody, figuring out a price and deciding. They would rather go to a portal and say, okay, I know what I want. I'm just going to place these and say, this is the orders that I want to take. And which is why, if you see, all of the e-commerce companies have now started shifting towards offerings that are tailor-made for B2B commerce, right? And this is why I feel that if the customers don't understand as a part of this journey that now they're going to have to offer more experiences to their end customers, or they're going to lose out on business, because I'm sure their competitors will, right? We've started working with a lot of B2B companies that are now setting up their commerce portals, that are now creating digital catalogs. All of these focus areas have shifted, and data sheets and all of this being in one place. And it's very important for the data to be very accurate. more than ever. And I feel that with this, I think the value proposition absolutely to explain, I think naturally has already come to a point where you cannot ignore it. But it's just that we sometimes have to give a wake up call to somebody and say, hey, you know what? This is still, you're going to miss out on something really big. And the cost, and this is more about, it's even bigger than, let's say, explaining an ROI and saying, okay, this is how much you could do in business from a commerce portal or whatever. It's more about the cost of a missed opportunity, because of not even doing anything is going to cost you a lot more than investing into a strategy like this. So it's extremely hard to put to a number of what your lost opportunity cost here is versus actually how much are you going to gain. Because anyways, you're at a zero from your digital channels. You're probably not as well integrated with EDIs, given your status as a legacy seller. You're losing out on all of these channels where your potential next generation buyers are. So absolutely, I think value proposition, the way we have to really pitch that is that, hey, ERPs are still going to continue to help you run your business as is, but are you ready for the future? And I certainly think payment MDM will play a big role in that.
I think there's two reasons for this in terms of the additional complexity of remaining market competitive as a B2B seller. I think the first thing is that like 99% of the manufacturers, in fact, I can't think of any manufacturer I have worked with over the last 4 years that was just a manufacturer.
Agreed.
9 times out of 10, they are manufacturing 10, 20, 30% of their catalog, but they're a wholesale distributor of the rest of their catalog. So they're a hybrid business, right? They're not just a manufacturer, they're also a wholesaler, they're also a distributor. And I think that one of the reasons for that I've discovered is because B2B sellers today, they want to move from selling SKUs to selling solutions, right? And in their vertical, they want to provide an entire end-to-end solution set. And the only way that they can do that, oftentimes, especially if we're talking a million SKU, 2 million SKU, 3 million SKU catalog, it is absolutely impossible. Or if there's multiple millions of SKUs needed to service a given market, it is virtually impossible for any one vendor to be able to manufacture 2, 3, 4 million SKUs. So the reality is they have their deep specialization and maybe in one component or in one area of a specific industry, but then they need to bring in a full package of solutions across multiple manufacturers to be able to sell into the market a complete package. So that's the first thing. Second of all, now more than ever, there are more B2B sales opportunities and sales channels than there ever were. Like you said, historically, the B2B world has been all about the relationship. Now we've got the new millennials are looking for their next supplier in Google. That's where they're going first. They're not necessarily going to trade shows. They're definitely not using the yellow pages. They're not going through the traditional routes to market, and they're certainly not waiting for a sales rep to come knock on their door to find a new supplier of the goods that they're selling into the market. Yeah. And so they're going to Google just like they do in their personal life, and they're looking for supplier widget X, manufacturer widget X, distributor widget X, and that's how they're finding their suppliers of the products that they need to sell into the market. Now, that means that there's been a proliferation not only of self-service e-commerce channels, not only distribution channels. I, as a manufacturer, I might sell through multiple distributors, multiple resellers in the market. But now DC360 says that the wave of marketplaces that are dedicated to B2B has absolutely exploded. They estimate by the end of 2024, there's going to be over 1,000 global dedicated B2B marketplaces. Some of those will be generic B2B marketplaces like Amazon Business. Some of those will be very niche, operating in a specific category or vertical. And I tell you, even if you may have your data ready to go for your e-commerce channel and you think your ERP can serve that, it is not ready to be sliced and diced across all these variety of different channels and be able to externalize this data in a meaningful way across all these potential channels in the market.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally agree to that, because just the magnitude of the data that is needed to present yourself across all of these channels. And I think this is going to be the omni-channel version of the D2C commerce, right? So it is going to be that you want to be where your buyers are. You really want to present yourself consistently across all of these channels. And on a fundamental level, and for all of this to happen, the first thing that you got to do is you got to centralize, build a repository of your data, and work on your data. Just to invest into building a good data game is going to take you miles, right? And then I feel for that, your PIM is the heart of it, right? If you don't have your data in a PIM, you haven't thought about enriching that data. One of the biggest things also with B2B customers that I've seen, right? Like they have this mentality to do what is minimum required to sell to the customer. And sometimes it's enough. I totally respect that, right? Sometimes you just need a SKU number because the seller knows, the buyer knows what they're looking for, and they're going to give you the exact number. And probably in your catalog, you just need a small description and some technical specification. But now going forward, I think it's going to become more and more, like you said, if somebody's coming through Google, they want to know everything, every little detail before they even pick up their phone and call you, right? So it's going to be a very interesting journey. And I feel that the whole consolidation and centralization of data into one single place, that is what the PIM will bring to the table. And I think that's going to be one of the key, most important driving factors of why you should start on a PIM journey.
I think also we have to think about the fact that, again, I constantly go back, right tool for the right job, right? Every ERP vendor is going to try to tell you, yep, we can hold any product data you need us to hold. And whilst technically that may be true, what I've found about a PIM system that is quite unique is that there's a tremendous amount of workflow logic. And we think of ERP at its most basic level. It's a database with a front end attached to it, right? If we think about a PIM system, the database with a front end attached to it. But it is so much more than that when we look into the deep capabilities of each one of those dedicated platforms. If we think of what a PIM system can do, that regardless almost of any PIM system, now some are better than others, some do specific functions better than others, some have more flexibility in their logic than others, but any PIM system, regardless of the vendor, regardless of the underlying technology, they do a few things that an ERP, for example, was never designed to do. So first of all, in a PIM system, it is designed to understand the relationship between products, right? Yeah. It is designed to understand the relationship between, say, a parent product and a child product or a variant product. Which attributes of the parent should apply to the children products, which attributes should roll up to the parents, or should be completely separate. It is also designed to create a data workflow, an enrichment workflow that can be managed on a user and a role-based basis. Yeah. Plus, as that data enrichment workflow happens, sometimes that needs to be contributed to by an external party, an external supplier, right? An ERP is not designed to be an external tool. It is designed to be an internal tool. As it goes through those stage gates of enrichment, right from maybe we only start out with a SKU and a name, right? That's maybe the most basic foundation of a product. As we add additional information, structured data attributes, long descriptions, images, videos, PDFs, exploded drawings, all the other assets that go along with being able to sell a commercial product, for example. We need to be able to version control that data so that we can roll data forward and we can roll it backward, and that we have a full audit trail by individual and by action as a product is enriched throughout its life cycle as a product in our business. Now, finally, we have the issue of localization. We have the issue of languages. We have the issue of channel. We have the issue of everything that is unique to a given market, category, or vertical, right? ERPs are not designed to deal with any of these data management challenges in the way that a PIM is designed to do that, right? I think what we're trying to say here, and I'd love your thoughts on this, that the value prop of a PIM, that it is specifically designed to manage everything around product data, regardless of channel and regardless of specific need.
And I think I will second that. And I will just actually add to this, right? It's not just ERPs. I've actually been to customers that have bought e-commerce platforms that also have a PIM module. Sorry, I'm quoting that. A lightweight PIM. And I've heard a lot of e-commerce vendors also put the same claim, right? And we've seen them. Why do you want to invest into a separate PIM? You could just make us the PIM in that. And honestly, not a bad job, because some of them have integrated to some marketplaces and have tried to create, but they also bring along a confused identity of what they really intend to serve, right? So it's not just the ERPs, honestly, it's also the e-commerce, it's also all over the product, because e-commerce traditionally needs a content management system in the back end to really drive the content. So they then started calling themselves, okay, we have a PIM module that can go up and we can continue to grow it. So I wouldn't just, and this is where we need to educate the potential B2B players that what are the real specializations. And like you claimed, all of this feature set in fundamental, almost any PIM will try to bring to the table in some form or capacity. Of course, some have their strengths, some are not going to be in the same direction, some are going to be cloud, some are going to be on-prem, they're going to be small, they're going to be large, and you need to decide what fits the best for you. But my point of view is here that a PIM is an absolute, it's like the heart of your entire data pipeline. And this is where you want it to, it's going to be pumping blood to different organs as it's needed. So your data is really being pumped to all of these different systems from one location, right? So that's one of the great things. And what this means also is that your architecture is decentralized. So tomorrow, your e-commerce system is maybe charging a hefty percentage that you want to get out of. Hey, why don't you you can decouple it because your PIM is actually holding all the data and you don't need to worry about where that goes. Okay, if my ERP itself is getting, maybe I scale up as a business. I started with a small ERP and I really want to go into now the bigger enterprise ERPs like SAP or something. Hey, that can be plugged out and plugged in as well with your product data still being consistent and the rest of your organization still operating in its own journey, right? So I think that's some of the things to keep in mind, because I know a lot of companies will claim this, a lot of products across your enterprise landscape will say that they can be the PIM, but in true stress sense, only a PIM will be a PIM.
And I think what I've seen is that even in businesses that say we have an ERP and our ERP is our PIM, or our e-commerce system is our PIM, we have the most enriched version of our product data in our commerce platform. So therefore, we're ready to go. In fact, we take the raw data out of our PIM, our raw data out of our ERP, the name, the SKU, the price, the inventory, we plumb that into our commerce system, and then we enrich everything else there. We add the images there, we add the downloadable information there, we add the descriptions there, we add all this different stuff, the filterable attributes, we upload those via CSV. But what I find, especially in the B2B world, is that 99% of the time, there is a tremendous amount of data scattered across the business that the sales reps typically, they know where to go and find a piece of data. So they've got some data on their desktop. They've got some data on the network drive. They've got some data in an Excel spreadsheet. They've got some data in a print catalog. They've got some data that comes from a supplier or a vendor, and that they have to try to aggregate that together and create that in a network drive and dump that there so that when they need it for a specific customer, they can go and they can pull it, they can attach it to an email, and they can send it across. Or, heaven forbid, they can send a fax across with some information. So I think that whenever I'm talking to these B2B sellers and I start talking to the sales reps about all the information that they have to gather from 10 different sources inside the business when a customer asks for a quote, or a customer asks for an additional piece of information, or an asset, or a piece of point of sale material, whatever it might be for the product, I find that the sales reps tend to be the glue in these scenarios. They know inside their organization, they know which data they can get from their ERP, they know which data they can get from maybe a commerce system, they know which data they need to get from a network drive, and they even know which information they need to go and get out of a print catalog off of a shelf that they then sit on their flatbed scanner, they scan a page, and then they send that across to their customer when they need a piece of information. So I find that whilst businesses might say, we've got an ERP, until you start asking the question, until you start probing a little bit deeper, they don't even realize they maybe have 20 different data silos or data sources around products in the business, until you start asking them, what about this case? What about this case? What about when somebody requests a quote? What is your workflow for that? When you start working through the processes that they go through in their business every single day to get data into their customer's hand to be able to make a buying decision, there is a bewildering array of silos for product data in a business.
No, I truly agree. I truly agree. And I think this is where businesses really need to look forward to the next set of journey. And and this is another part of, and actually now you bring to another value proposition within a PIM, is that the operational efficiency, just amount of effort that can be saved by good data availability, right? If the rep had one system to go to where they could punch in and search for a product and provide all the information that they needed and provide a quote based on that, it would just make their life so much easier and so much of man effort that could be saved by doing that. And I think what discourages people from doing that is breaking away from bad habits is really hard, right? You don't want to you don't want to invest the time and energy it's going to take for you to really get in your data into a good shape, and you just feel that it's much easier for my reps to spend extra time right now and then figure it out. And what happens with this mentality is also that certain things become people dependent, where, let's say, for example, if you had somebody leading a category and if they leave, all of a sudden you'll see a drop in your sales, but you don't realize that it was the data and the way that person knew how to access the data and make it available to a customer and quote in the right amount of time. That was what was the winning factor. And so these nuances are extremely hard to identify and point out. But I think it's about working with the customers, really explaining to them about the operational efficiencies that can be gained and what good data can really drive, right? Like you said, breaking down the silos, getting into a more efficient rhythm and a clean workflow for, and you could even have your pricing and quoting systems that are connected to the PIM. So you don't even need to search out of a PIM. You could actually search from your CPQ system. So much can be achieved when you're thinking data first.
And I'm going to give you a real life example of the benefit of a PIM addressing exactly what you just talked about from a conversation, a discovery that I was doing yesterday with a sales team inside of a major international belt manufacturer, industrial belt manufacturer.
Mhm.
They said, and I was speaking to the sales team, so the discovery yesterday was only with the sales team. And they gave me examples of institutional or tribal knowledge, like what you just referred to. And they gave me one specific example of that this data doesn't exist anywhere in the business today. It doesn't exist in a PIM. It doesn't exist in a spreadsheet. It doesn't exist on a network drive. It exists nowhere but in the sales reps' heads.
Wow.
So they said, okay, in our internal ERP, we know what a direct cross-reference is to a competitor's product, for example. So if we've got a SKU from a competitor, then we know exactly what our cross-referenceable product is for that exact application. So we know what our version of that belt is. We say, okay, here's their SKU, here's our equivalent SKU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair enough.
But what they said is, if we are in a situation as a sales rep where that SKU that is our equivalent, our direct replacement, are effectively our OEM equivalent, if we don't have that product in stock, we will look at the attributes of that belt and we will know, because of our experience in the industry, that any belt with the same attributes that is within 0.5 of an inch of the same length of that belt can be used, because in those applications there's always a tensioner, there's an idler arm that can easily take up to 0.5 of an inch of a belt length difference, and those can be substituted in. They can be direct substitutes. So when we get a request for a product, if we're out of stock of that product, we go into our database, we look for equivalent products that are within 0.5 larger or longer or shorter than that product, and we say, hey, this will work for you because it's within 0.5. Now, that's something that can actually be set up within a PIM system based on business logic and rules to say, this is a substitute. This has all the same product attributes as this product, but the only difference is it is either 0.5 of an inch or less, shorter or longer than that product. Now, this can be set up as a business rule or business logic as a substitution product in a PIM system. Instead of that institutional knowledge needing to come from a sales rep, we go from one-to-one product knowledge to one-to-many product knowledge. And so what happens if that sales rep with that piece of knowledge in the business, what happens if they get hit by a bus, they have an accident, they leave the company? That tribal knowledge leaves the business unless it's in a system that is designed to house and reuse and deploy that knowledge universally.
Yep. And this is the power of the PIM, right? All of the business logic engine coming up with a new wave. And honestly, I think with the new wave of AI coming in and everybody talking about it, I honestly imagine a world where there's going to be agents that are AI agents and not really humans at some point, right? But what are they really going to sell off of? They're going to sell off of good data. if an agent is not aware of where the data is, and so if you haven't even centralized it. So for an example, if that sales rep in your example was looking out of a print catalog or somewhere, or just knew out of a spreadsheet that these were all the products and knew where to find them, it would just be impossible for anybody else to replace that person ever. And this is where I think good data coming in, you're setting it up together. And then let's say you want an AI agent of some kind in the future interacting with your customers and helping them with certain things. How are they going to do that without the great data that's available in the back end? With the onset of AI, I think just the fact that anybody who's thinking that we're going to skip this one, we're going to sit out this wave of AI and just let the world move on, I think they're going to be really left behind. And there's going to be a lot bigger, newer journeys that we haven't even seen yet. And again, I'm just maybe being too optimistic here, but in the next decade, I completely anticipate different journeys than what we really see right now, and different agents, AI agents talking to each other. Maybe the buyer is an AI agent. You don't even know. So that is,
Yes.
so I see a world that's going to change. And that world, in my opinion, is going to be very honestly dependent on good data, because AI can get bias. AI can give you crappy results until you don't have that correlation between the agent and the data, right? If it's not fed with good data, it's going to turn out crappy results, and people are going to realize that you're not adding the value that somebody else could be providing. Yeah, without data, I don't see AI functioning at all.
In many instances, not only do I agree with you, I just simply look at AI in many instances as another interface to data. It's just another interface, whether it's on an Amazon, whether it's on your own website, whether it's on a print catalog. These are all just interfaces. These are all just front ends to the back end data that you have available. And for example, this same belt company, in their back office data, they know which belts fit a specific application or piece of equipment, right? So they've got application data, right? They not only have cross-reference and OEM equivalent data, but then they have application data, right? So as of today, a customer might be able to come to their B2B e-commerce website, for example. They might search through a category tree for the application or their device, and then the catalog will show which belts will fit that specific application or device. Or they can search by an OEM equivalent and say, this is our version of that OEM product, right? And they do that through the interface, whether it be through the search bar or whether it be through the category navigation. They can identify the application or the equivalency through that interface, right? In the future, as you say, let's say I have a chatbot on my website, right? And I can just tell them, this is my device, this is my VIN number, this is my year, this is what it is. Tell me which belt will work for this function of the device, right? Now, if I've got the data ready, instead of the customer having to navigate via search and results or by a category structure, the chatbot now has access to that same data set and can say, this is exactly the belt you need. But if that belt is out of stock, if I know within the rule set in the back end, okay, I can look for an equivalent belt that's 0.5 of an inch longer or shorter, I can say, I, as a chatbot then, because I have access to that same data set, I can say, we're out of stock of that direct replacement item. However, this will work as a substitution into this environment because it's within 0.5 inches. So it can have a conversation with you, right? The AI agent can have a conversation with you or your agent.
Yeah.
And when you tell them what you need for your specific use case as the buyer, then they can tell you what works in your situation. You don't have to search. You cut out 3 or 4 steps from the buyer journey. You remove 3 or 4 steps of friction there by having an agent that you can just tell them what you need. You can tell them what you need it for, and it can tell you this is a part that will work for you. And this is, I think that most B2B sellers, they don't really understand the one-to-many model of product data, right? And it is going to become even more critical in the age of AI because it all comes back to what is the base data set the AI has to present to the customer.
Exactly. And then I think I'll just, on my last LinkedIn post, and I just put it that a colleague had once told me that with earlier in the IT terms, it was garbage in and garbage out. With AI, it is garbage in and disaster out. Because if you end up, let's say, if your agent is actually going to recommend to a customer an actual end product, and if the customer gets the wrong product, That's going to screw their trust in the journey forever. They're not going to be, they're never going to come back and talk to your AI agent, right? Because they know that they didn't get the right thing to work for the first time. So data is going to be absolutely critical. And because AI is actionable, if AI doesn't play on good data, it is going to give out the wrong actions, place the wrong orders, recommend the wrong products, and that's going to really drive us in the wrong direction. And this is why I feel that the technology in terms of AI will also get more accurate over time. But without good data, it's still not going to work out. And this is where I just feel that, like I said, in the next decade or so, I feel a lot of companies that are not in this journey and not actually working on their data right now are going to miss out on this potential explosion of new journeys, new ways of buying, and new competitive scenarios. I think the world is about to change, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. Now, we've talked about some of the key value drivers of a PIM, or some of the key ways in which technical solution architects inside the business, IT specialists, sales specialists, marketing specialists, etc., how they can start to build out the business case for a PIM, breaking down data silos, data centralization, enabling commerce through better data, localizing and contextualizing data, easier catalog building based on tribal and institutional knowledge, product data that needs to be prepared for all these amazing new AI use cases, because every other piece of technology in the digital stack, including personalization engines, rely on good product data to be able to personalize the customer journey on the front end of these experiences. Now, if we take it one step further and we say, okay, the next step, we've made the business case. The business is bought in to the idea of a PIM and the value prop of a PIM. Now, the next step is usually the PIM selection process. Maybe we can talk very briefly in the last few minutes that we have together in this episode. Maybe we can talk briefly about some of the PIM selection criteria that you would suggest that brands focus on when they're looking for a PIM that is going to fit their specific use cases. And some of the things that come to mind, as you discussed, there are many different sizes and shapes and different PIM systems that are designed for different, not only scales of businesses, but different business models. Some are designed really to work really well for B2B. Some are designed really well to work for B2C, D2C, and retail, but maybe aren't as great for the B2B use cases. Some are designed to have more support, more complex workflows, support more complex business logic within the PIM. Some are really simplistic and only have basic business logic out of the box. And then, of course, we have a situation where there's on-premise PIM technology, there's cloud native or SaaS technology, and then there's PaaS technology, platform as a service technology, which are cloud managed and have versions to them. So there's a number of criteria that I think businesses should start thinking about when they start to think about what is the PIM that is a good fit for us. It's not just the cost, right? There's so many more factors to this other than just the cost of the PIM. Can you give some of your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the first one, which I think we'll go in the order of the priority. I think the first one, in my opinion, is deciding whether you want something that is, like you said, is it a PaaS, is it cloud? Cloud can mean different things, so I want to clarify that. I will come back to that. And is it on-prem? And in my opinion, and in the day and age where we live in, I think cloud native makes a lot of sense. I know there's a lot of talk about PIMs being headless, but then are you really a B2B company that is going to invest into building an interface, completely designing? No, this is not e-commerce. E-commerce works very differently. So which is why I think for me, the most important criteria, and this is my personal recommendation and opinion, is that you got to go with a cloud native SaaS solution. Okay. It's a long-term investment. Most PIM platforms that you make investment into will be a part of your landscape. I've seen where it's a part of their landscape for 10 years or 15 years. But at least an average life of a PIM before you would consider replacing a PIM will be 5 years at a minimum, because otherwise the ROI wouldn't make sense, right? You wouldn't want to invest into a platform which you have to replace pretty soon. Now, if you're going to be stuck for 5 years with something that is on-prem and that you have to manage, that doesn't upgrade itself, that you need to go back and maintain, or you need to have an engineer who's just specially whose job in his entire job description is just to identify and manage that PIM, you're really investing your resources and energy into the wrong place, right? Which is why I am a huge advocate for cloud native solutions that will, that go. And this way, it's very important to understand cloud native versus cloud managed. That a lot of vendors
Yes.
will tell you, oh, cloud as well, but then what that really means is that they have a software that they install on a computer that is virtual on a cloud, but that
Yes.
doesn't upgrade
It's
itself.
on premise on their infrastructure.
Exactly.
So it's single tenant cloud is effectively PaaS, platform as a service, versus multi-tenant SaaS, which is versionless, auto updated. Security is managed by the vendor. Scalability is managed by the vendor. Hosting and infrastructure completely owned by the vendor. And all you do is you just consume it through a browser.
Exactly. And this is where I think that also both, and this is where I'm a huge advocate for Syndigo, of course. And with this, that you have all of these apps and things that are built onto the platform that allows you to do a lot more. And as the world changes, the platform is going to change and evolve with this whole journey, right? So I am a huge advocate of having cloud native solutions. And of course, I represent a lot of part of me represents Syndigo. So a huge advocate for that as well. But I think cloud native should be your first criteria of designing whether you want for whatever solution. Second is the ease of using a system. Okay, I know that ERPs have this old UIs, which really are like they have this whole. They give you the feeling that you're back in the early 2000s, and you're looking at that. You got it with. What's happened now is that everybody's pretty much used to e-commerce and working on e-commerce and or like working on going on Amazon, finding things and interacting with Google. All of these things have made certain interaction very natural of how we work with the computer, right? So it is very important that the user experience is prioritized, because you don't want to spend a ton of time, let's say, training a merchandising team or a data team to figuring out how to
Or a
use
sales
it.
team even.
Or even your sales team. It should be intuitive. You should be able to come in. It should be easy to find what I need to do, and also find what I'm looking for, right? As simple as that. And so you have to prioritize the user experience. So the platform itself, then the user experience, and beyond that, the third thing, like we said, is the world is going to be multi-channel. So it is not going to be that, okay, PIM sends your data to e-commerce and you're done. You're going to have thousands of new channels that are going to come up. You'll have new initiatives that are going to happen. There's going to be mergers or acquisitions, which has become the norm right now, where companies will come together. So you want something that integrates very easily, right? Able to pull data from certain systems, you're able to push it easily. You have an easy way to interface with this cloud platform. This is something that you should absolutely consider, where how easy it is to integrate into the platform. And I think these are some of the three main parameters that I would say I would assess a cloud platform on. And last is, of course, the governance capabilities around workflows and all of that, because that is very important. That drives how easily you're able to process or define a process within the PIM. So these are some of the 3 or 4 parameters that I would say are important when you're deciding on buying a PIM.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think the other benefit of a SaaS platform is that it makes it much easier to externalize that PIM to, say, for example, external suppliers, external distributors, external third parties that need to get their product data into your PIM in the data model that you have defined inside your PIM, and it needs to be mapped correctly. If it's an on-premise technology, or even if it's a PaaS technology, oftentimes the API layer is either it doesn't have one, oftentimes it won't have an API layer at all, or it needs to be custom developed. The API layer needs to be custom developed, custom exposed. Then you also have to worry about system security. You have to worry about system scalability. You have to worry about patching. You have to worry about upgrades. You have to worry about the systems going offline during those upgrades and patching cycles. Similar to how almost the entire commerce world has moved to SaaS platforms, multi-tenant SaaS platforms, so has the vast majority of the PIM world. Now, there are some legacy technologies out there that are on-prem or PaaS, but the best PIM systems out there, the most integratable, the most flexible, the ones that have built-in audit trails, the ones that have built-in workflows and business logic, those almost all are modern SaaS, multi-tenant SaaS software delivery approaches. Listen, this has been a fantastic discussion. An hour has absolutely flown by. Now, I cannot wait for our next discussion around the PIM. We've covered key value drivers, the ability to make a business case for a PIM inside your business. also some of the key PIM selection criteria. In our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about phases of an implementation. What are the 4 or 5 key phases of a PIM implementation for these B2B sellers? And going through these phases of implementation, and I think understanding what these look like, at least at a high level, will be able to set these businesses up for success, especially if they've already decided to implement a PIM, but they don't necessarily know what the steps in the process to help ensure a successful implementation, but more importantly, successful adoption and usage inside the business. There's some key steps they can take even before they start the implementation, some foundational work that they can do inside their businesses to ensure a great project and, more important, program of work outcome. And we're going to talk about those on our next episode. Thank you so much for your time, Samarth. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Super excited, Jason. Thank you.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.